So we decided what we were going to do is we were going to touch on one of my favorite books. And it's one of my favorite books because I think it's one of the most oft misinterpreted, mistranslated, and misused books in Tanakh. And it's the book of Daniel. Why do I say that? Because most people that are Christian consider the book of Daniel part of the prophets, and yet it's not part of the prophets because we never see Daniel actually having a direct conversation with God or God calling him directly to speak to the people of Israel. So, but specifically what we want to do is we want to touch on Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14, which is often translated as the Messiah coming on the clouds of heaven.
Well, I'll say this, Daniel 7, just so people know, some people are afraid of the book of Daniel. Daniel reads very exquisitely like a narrative. It's very easy to read until you reach this chapter. It means 1 through 6 is a fabulous narrative. And not only that, you come to really understand why is Daniel called beloved by God. You'll get it by the end of chapter 6. Mm-hmm. Chapter 7, it's really a person has to wash themselves to prepare their minds to absorb this soaring chapter. It literally is when you're taking off in a plane and you're on a 747, especially a wide body, and as the plane begins to take off, it's given permission and it starts rolling down, and then the engines surge, and then you're moving and you're going 120, 130, 140, and suddenly the wheels are not touching the ground, and then the engines soar because it doesn't have that friction, and then the wheels go in and the drag is reduced, and then the power just shoots you straight up. That's Daniel chapter 7, and you never land. It's important to understand what comes into view in the 7th chapter of Daniel. There is a theme that we find throughout the latter prophets, and we're going to call Daniel a prophet for the moment, and it's important to understand that all, of course, as Ira mentioned a moment ago, Daniel, we're at the very end of the prophetic period. As such, people, not only Daniel, but even Zechariah, who was technically a prophet, is receiving everything from an angel. Did you ever drive from one city to another, perhaps in the United States, and you're going from one far distance to another, and you're listening to a radio station, and as you're driving out of the city and out of the parameters, and it's a sort of a good station, it starts to fizzle out. You're going, oh man, can you hang on? And suddenly it's buzzed out. That's what's happening now. There's the Kedusha. We're not going to go into why this is, but the end of the prophetic period, the connection is beginning to be lost. It doesn't mean that the truth is lost, but the manner of communication through an angel begins to impose itself, and we see it here. It's very important to remember that Daniel is aware of events that no prophet was. According to Jewish tradition, he knew when the Messiah would come. We know it. We see it in the text. At the end of the book, in chapter 12, Daniel begins to say too much about when it's going to happen, and he's silenced. The angel says, shut this book. So we know that Daniel knew more than Isaiah. So it's when we use the word prophet versus a person receives something through Ruach HaKodesh, these words are not meaningful in terms of truth. Daniel saw what other prophets did not see. So I want to just call him a prophet for the sake of understanding the text. We're just going to use that in our language here. Mm-hmm. Rather than be hyper technical.
Well, so my question is then, the only point that I'm trying to make is that obviously when we get into chapter 7, we're going to see that we're talking about a dream.
Right.
And we're not talking about something, we don't see, like, for instance, Yeshaya or Yirmiyahu or whatever, where Hashem right at the beginning says, go speak to my people, or this is the word of Hashem to Bnei Israel, so forth. That's the only point that I was trying to make through that.
Right. But why does it have to be a dream? Meaning, this is very critical. Daniel is seeing things. The reason it's in a dream is not because of its prophetic quality. The reason it had to be in a dream is he's observing things that never happened.
Right.
And therefore, this is not an optical illusion, but what we see here is he's seeing something in a dream, which means he's observing, actually visually seeing things that are not in front of him. So he's not having when Moses saw a bush that was burning, he saw a burning bush that would not be consumed. He actually saw that. Daniel sees this in his mind's eye in a dream, because they are events that never happen, and they're metaphors for the kingdoms that will arise. And then suddenly comes into view the Mashiach himself and the Messianic age. Therefore, it has to be in a dream. And also it alludes to this because he calls it, it's so yummy, he calls it a night vision. This is very interesting because you're in the night, meaning he's in exile, we're in exile, that's the night. But he sees these things in very bright, exquisite colors, and we're going to see these extraordinary images with vivid details emerging right now before our eyes. And Daniel now conveys this to us in a way that no prophet in history ever did. So pay attention to every word. Every word is counted here. There's not one extra in these passages. We can continue just talking about this for a moment. It's vital for every listener to listen carefully. Whenever we look at these passages, whether it's in Zechariah, the 4 chariots, the 4 horses in Zechariah, each one a different color. We see the statue that is in Nebuchadnezzar's dream earlier on in the book of Daniel. It has 4 segments, but then some 5th element comes in. Whenever you see the number 4 here, ever, that's always referring to the 4 kingdoms that would subjugate the Jewish people from Babylon. The Ming dynasty didn't subjugate the Jews. From Babylon to Persia to Greece and finally Rome. And Rome is always, that number 4 is not monolithic. This is very important. Look at the feet made of clay and iron. It's not monolithic and it cracks. Look at the 4th horse. It has this kind of ash color. We're going someplace so high. I plead with you, the listener, just listen like you've never listened in your life, because you have to see that we're not imposing anything on the passage. Rather, we're washing ourselves with these extraordinary, towering texts. Mm-hmm. Every time we get to the 4th is strange, because the 4th kingdom, or this 4th image, is morphing. It's not pure. The color of the 4th horse, we see many translations. We don't really know what to make of it. It's a ash color. What is ash? It doesn't mean anything. It means a mixture of all these different things. Why is the 4th? Why is the legs made of clay and iron? They don't adhere to each other. So we're making sure that we're looking at a pattern that's unmistakable. We don't want to read into the text. So the first 3 is an example. That's Babylon. And we see them being destroyed, one after the other, but not utter destruction, but rather they're passing on their kingdom to the next, which means each one absorbs the one previous. The previous kingdom simply loses its power. And then we're brought into view the Messiah himself coming on the clouds of heaven. But he's called like a man, not a man. He's called coming on the clouds of heaven. What does that mean? Did he really need clouds? Means water vapor to walk on? Like without clouds, he couldn't be. Like, what is going on here? What's happening? So that's what's very.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So I was going to say, it's very, very powerful verses. And the only thing that we're going to overlay onto this is context, obviously. Not adding anything to it. But I think what you're saying is really powerful, because the idea of these 4 kingdoms, and we see them again at the end of this chapter, in chapter 7 as well, and talking about the 4 beasts or the 4 kingdoms, it really speaks about, rather than making it this kind of lofty spiritual thing, kind of bringing it back down to earth and really speaking not just about Messiah, but speaking about Israel as well.
Yes, this is very important.
And it's very important. And I think the other thing that I just wanted to say, and I certainly want you to speak about this a little bit, is about the importance of understanding that we're not looking at the Hebrew in Daniel. What we're looking at is Aramaic.
Right. Well, Aramaic and Hebrew are sister languages.
Similar.
But it's true. From Daniel chapter 2, when the narrative begins, it literally says we're going to start talking Aramaic. Until this chapter, it's Aramaic, and then the rest of the book of Daniel is in the Hebrew language. But this is not like just people who don't speak Hebrew or Aramaic. it's not like French and Italian or Spanish that are very related or close, or Arabic. Aramaic and Hebrew really are sister languages, that if you read Hebrew well, you can go through the Aramaic and basically make sense of it. It's very, very close. In fact, in Jewish law, they are considered the same language. And what I mean is that not the same language, but for instance, a Jewish divorce, I don't want to go because we're going off topic. A Jewish divorce can only be written in one language, but there is Aramaic and Hebrew, but it's considered the same language. Right. So just for the listeners who don't understand this point, these are sister languages like nothing you know. You can't compare it to anything else. They just rub together. Of course, there are different words, certainly different prefix, suffix. There are certain elements that are phrased differently, but they're very, very close. But Daniel is bringing to view, but what I want the listeners to understand, I'm literally touching your ear, because this is what Daniel did, is that everything here is very literal. Even what appears superficially to be wild or crazy, it's like, what are we talking about here? Everything really is very organized, and everything here is quite literal. And I would give an example. Our great-great-grandfathers, they could read Ezekiel. They could read the war between Gog and Magog. What state of Israel? What Persia? What's going on? And now we know it meant everything literally, right? Why is it important to talk about Jews who are not religious in Nehemiah coming to build the second temple? It was quite literally describing the irreligious Zionists building this third commonwealth. Everything here is meant in a very little way, but we're using the word like a lot. Why? Because obviously we're not talking about an actual beast, but we're talking about something like a beast. We're not talking about literally a man because it's an image. It's something like a man. So when you see the word like a man, what does that mean, like a man? What's the modifier there? The modifier is as different as opposed to the four beasts. The four that are like a beast, the fifth is like a man. That's what it means. But people always read verse 13 out of context. And therefore they get scared. They go, why is it like the Son of Man? Is it not really Son of Man? No. Daniel presumed Daniel didn't mean to make this passage difficult or puzzling, ambiguous or amorphic. Rather, he just anticipated there was a presumption on the part of the prophet that you have already read the first 12 passages of this text. So by 13, he knows when he says like, you already know about the like. Let me give you an example just for a moment so the listeners understand this. And by the way, I'm interrupting myself. Think carefully at a Passover Seder. We have 4 glasses of wine. We drink them that represent the 4 redemptions. Mm-hmm. Abraham had to defeat the 4 kings before he blessed by Melchizedek, Genesis 13 and 14. This fits together so much. You literally, if you understand what I'm saying, your life will change forever. So we have the 4 glasses of wine. God redeemed us from each of these kingdoms. And then there's a 5th glass, and we don't drink from it, that represents Elijah, the Messianic age. It's the same thing. This is so big. It's so holy. This is so unbelievable. You have to listen let's just take the first one, Babylon. Now, when you look at your clock right now, you'll notice that it's, let's say, 3:22 New York time. There are 24 hours in a day. There are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. Where does that come from? Who came up with that? That's Babylonian. Because you can have 40 hours in a day. It's arbitrary. Now, I have a theory. I don't know if this is true. Daniel taught the Babylonians about the times and wisdom, and it was developed exactly when Daniel was in Babylon. But I cannot prove this. But let's just say this. So Babylonian culture was then transferred over to the Persian kingdom. They didn't throw away everything the Babylonians came up with. And certainly the Romans didn't throw away what the Greeks came up with. Greco-Roman Empire, 200 BC, 200 CE. Now let's just for a moment, I want to show you how exquisite this is. The first beast we're introduced to, it's like a beast. This is a lion. And what happens to the lion, which is Babylon? 2 things essentially occur. The lion, instead of having a lion's heart, a lion's heart is about 4 times the size of a human heart, and it walks on 4 legs, so it can run so fast and so powerful. But if we walk on 2 legs, we can never run as fast as a lion. So what happens is if a lion is given a human heart and it can only walk on 2 legs, what would happen to the extraordinary abilities of a lion? It no longer can pump that kind of oxygen to the body to sustain that kind of power. And by walking on two legs, it no longer has the speed. All of its power has been removed, but yet it's still aligned. It's still alive. That's what's very important. So in all of these like beasts, these obviously not beasts, what lion walks around with a human heart and two legs, like beasts, demonstrates that the Babylonian Empire comes to an end, but the Babylonian culture and thought is then transferred over to the next kingdom, but Babylon has no power, just 2 feet and a human heart. Everything that makes a lion powerful has been stripped away. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. You're doing good.
Beautiful. Okay. I don't want to go into all these, but I want you to understand that that's what's happening. So it's not a lion, it's like a lion. Now, we go through the next one. We have a bear, leopard. This I'll leave for you to go. The key point is Daniel encounters something just absolutely he can't make sense of it. You remember our horse, ash color. You remember the fourth chariot. You remember the legs, clay and iron, which means it's first of all not monolithic. The Babylonian Empire was. The Greek Empire was monolithic. But the Roman Empire is going to change dramatically, and we know it does, because the Roman Empire, ultimately, Christianity would convert to Rome. And remember what I said, it's not Rome converted to Christianity. So what you have is you have the Roman Empire, Pompey enters Jerusalem in 66 BCE, and suddenly, eventually, Rome changes. We get into wars with Rome. You have the 10 horns, which are the 10 emperors from the time of Caesar, the first emperor, until the time of Vespasian, the last emperor, when the temple was destroyed. You have the little horn that Titus, who was the general during the destruction of the second temple, ultimately will then emerge as the emperor of Rome following Vespasian, but he's not emperor during the time of the destruction of the second temple itself in the year 70. But it's a crazy thing that is morphing. Daniel will continue to discuss this very wild and frightening creature. Now, what happens eventually? We know that Rome initially was not pro-Christian. They didn't recognize Christianity as official religion, but in the 4th century, in about 311 CE, in the Common Era, Constantine converts to Christianity. To give you some sense of numbers, about 5% of the Roman Empire in the year 300 was Christian. By the end of Theodosius's reign, he reigned over both East and West. By the time we get to the year 400, fully 50% of the Roman Empire is Christian, and more importantly, Rome is now Christian. That's the official religion of the Roman Empire, and now that spells hell for the Jewish people. So Rome, this fourth beast, has morphed into something absolutely horrible. Anyone who has even a perfunctory knowledge of Jewish history, there has been no existence more horrific than that one under this fourth beast. Now, what happens, the fourth beast, therefore, is not monolithic. It's transferring, because even when it becomes Christian, by the end of the 4th century, there's splits, east, west. And by the time we come to 1054, pow, we have a full break between east and west. And what does Roman Catholicism mean, really? That means, let me rephrase that question. How can we articulate how Roman Catholicism, the largest Christian denomination in the world, how is it uniquely different than the Protestant or other denominations? You can reduce it. Of course, this answer could be given in many ways, but if I had to use one phrase that explains everything, is ecclesiastical authority. Because you can have an Anglican church, as an example, which ritually is very close to Roman Catholicism, I'm talking Western Roman Catholicism, the Latin Church. But in fact, ecclesiastical authority is done. And that's the unique difference. So we have that split, that tear apart. Today, Christianity is the most variegated religion in the world. And incidentally, it was far more variegated in the first 3 centuries. It splits apart again during the Reformation and tears apart and tears apart. Yet, it's the same substance. Jews thought that Luther would somehow help the Jews in the early stages, because now we have a Protestant movement that helps us with it. It became worse. Luther became more anti-Semitic than the Latin Church does. So now what happens here is we see someone, again, when we see the word like, well, how are we supposed to understand this preface? It's both Aramaic and Hebrew have the same preface. How do we understand ka? What's the ka? The prefix is kivar. What does that mean? Kivar, which means like a man. Bar means the man. It's a conjugated noun. Kivar means, just like Hebrew, means like a man. the way you need to understand it, and obviously you won't know it does, is it's going, instead of like a lion or like a leopard, it's now like a man. But why does he need to come on the clouds of heaven? And it's talking about Mashiach coming at the end of days. Why does Mashiach need clouds? What is this, like stupid? Did they think that clouds can hold somebody up and he can't just walk in? And why does he need to fly on a cloud? What does clouds mean?
Well,
what is it doing here?
Look at clouds. If we look at clouds and, all throughout the Tanakh, I think you get your answer.
Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Rob,
go a little more.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I think that you're on something. You need to mention this. Go ahead, Ira.
Just explain something. There's one other question I'm going to raise, and I ask every person now to keep your mind very, very clean and very pure. Listen carefully. Just because this is very holy, just keep your mind, take every other thought out of your head. It's interesting that we see in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that the nations that will come up against Yerushalayim, against Jerusalem, and Jerusalem means the land of Israel in the Messianic age, they're coming from Gog Umagog. Now, we know there are different explanations of what that means, but the fact is, my friends, you look at the map, there's no place called Gog. You'll ask me why the words add up to 70, which means numerically each letter has a value, and 70 represents the 70 nations of the world. But that's not the plain meaning of the text. The word Gog, this is very special. The word Gog in Hebrew is a simple word that means a roof. That's all it means. Gog is a roof. Now, you have in this text people, that means someone like a man is coming on the clouds of heaven to whom? To those who fear God, to those who love Hashem. So therefore, we have two groups of people. One group are those who trust in the clouds of heaven. Mm-hmm. They don't need a roof. Listen carefully. What are the clouds of heaven? This is what protected the nation of Israel when they wandered through the desert for 40 years. There were clouds above them that protected them from the elements and guarded them as they came to the promised land. I know you're smiling right now. That's the clouds of heaven. The Anani Akavo, they're above the tabernacle. Now listen carefully. There are other people, and logically, they don't trust in clouds. Would you trust clouds to protect you? Well, I hope you would. But there are others who say, no, I want a reinforced concrete roof. And that's what I'm going to put my trust in. I'm going to build something from the ground, and I'm not going to trust in God. And those are the people are the people of the roof. And this now spells out the end of days. The clash of the end of days. You have two forces in the world. I'm not going to say Jew and Gentile, because Gentiles are going to grab onto the people of the clouds. So what happens is the people who trust in the roof, that's why a sukkah, the schach, the covering, cannot be connected to the ground. It can't be mechubel lakarka. It has to be just something very plain that ordinarily would never protect you. It has to be a sukkah, a booth that we celebrate on tabernacles, has to be a very flimsy booth. In fact, Jewish law is if it's too strong, if it's too tall, it's not even valid.
So it can't be permanent at all. It can't have any permanence either. It's
no
just
permanence. That's the case. We're leaving our diras keva, which means our permanent dwelling, and for 7 days we're entering into a diras arai, which means a very impermanent dwelling that a little wind can blow away. Seemingly, it could provide no protection. Now let's come into contact with the divine. Let's give Hashem a kiss. What happens at the end of days, what's coming into view here, this is not our clouds, and he needs to walk on clouds. That's sophomoric. That's like someone watching a cartoon of Casper. Let's strip that out of here. This is so high. This is so holy. We have now in view, which Daniel, HaKadosh VaTorah, the holy, who's holy and pure, and is beloved by God, brings now into view the two sides, the real clash at the end of days. And that is those who trust in the roof, those who don't trust in God, in the clouds of heaven, go to war against who? Those who trust in the clouds of heaven. And that war, the people of the roof, led by Persia, ultimately will be destroyed. Zechariah chapter 12. that Jerusalem will be a heavy, burdensome stone, that anyone who dares to come against it will be destroyed. But there will be people, Jew and Gentile. Look at Zechariah 13:8-9. There will be people among the nations. In fact, it basically divides the world into three parts. Two parts, and it doesn't say 2/3, although that's the translation. The words there are very delicious. I want you to rub your lips for a second. It says, if you look, you got to rub your lips. This is very, very intense. Just rub your lips now for a second, because it says there, the Hebrew is Pishnayim. Pishnayim, which is the mouth of two, is the identical language of Pishnayim, of witnesses, which means, as Isaiah says to the nations, he calls upon them and says, come forward and give your testimony. Tell us about earlier days. It's a taunt to the nations. You have nothing to add. So Pishnayim, the mouth of two, are coming forward. That means the enemy's going, we know what's going on. They're going to be destroyed. According to Jewish tradition, of course, we know who this is today. That's Yishmael and Edom. They are going to be destroyed. But there will be a third. It doesn't mean 33%. It's misunderstood. A third segment. These are non-Jews who will come and say, Hashem, meaning the God of the clouds, you are my God. God will say, you are my people. He will then pass them through fire, meaning purify them like gold. And then, V'nemar v'hoya Hashem l'melech kol haaretz. Hashem will be God of the whole universe. So therefore, I feel shivers all down my arms now. So that means, and that's why in Zechariah 14, holy children of the Most High. Well, therefore, we have the end time war where the people of the clouds who trust in clouds are attacked by those who trust in the roof. And what occurs at the end of days? The people who trust in the roof are destroyed. That's Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39. And what holiday do the last third, the non-Jews, celebrate in the Messianic age? Look at Zechariah chapter 14.
Chapter 14.
Can I ask you a question, Rabbi, real quick?
Tabernacles, bingo.
When we look at this concept of clouds as well, I was looking at a couple of verses, earlier about this, and incredible what you're sharing. And then I also noticed that a lot of times when we see clouds referred to, that it talks about the swiftness with which God acts as well.
Yes.
Like, for instance, in Isaiah 19:1, it says, Masei Mitzrayim hinei Adonai rochev alav.
Right.
I mounted on a swift cloud, when he brings judgment against Mitzrayim, against Egypt. And then I love this one in Yirmiyahu in Jeremiah 4, verse 13. It says, behold, like a cloud, that word cloud. Like, unto a cloud he rises up, like a whirlwind are his chariots. And there's so many of these. It's
delicious.
It is delicious.
Do you want to go papow? Do you want to go fly?
Papow.
Come on.
Sure.
You want to just fly for a second? Yeah. It's very interesting in Isaiah 14. You have to remember, for Isaiah to write about the Babylonian Empire will be like someone in the 14th century describing the Soviet Union. So just understand, he's describing the Babylonian Empire, chapter 14, and he's describing the haughtiness of Babylon. This is very, very big, and I'm asked to listen to prepare yourself. You'll notice very carefully, if you look very carefully at a passage in Isaiah 14, which is describing what the enemy will do. It basically saying, I'm going to transcend. I'm going to come on the top of clouds. I'm going above clouds, and I'm going to make myself even more higher than God. So we see that on both sides. Everyone's trying to, in some way, go, I'm higher than clouds. I'm bigger than clouds. It's very, very extraordinary what we're looking at here. Absolutely beautiful.
Amazing.
Yes, I'm going to ascend on tops of clouds. It's just absolutely, I'll make myself like the Most High. That's what Babylon tried to do. But ultimately, it was like the morning star, which is Venus. 14, right? What is Venus? Venus is the last star that's visible in the morning because it's so bright. But by the way, just so people know, just a little science here, there are stars in the sky during the day. They're just not visible because the sun outshines it, so we can't see it. They're there. We only can see it at night. So therefore, Venus is kind of hanging on at the end, and ultimately it suddenly falls away, just like Babylon falls away. That's what's so beautiful. Everyone is using this text, this language. And ultimately what Daniel's saying here is the Mashiach of Volitzian Goyal, Isaiah 59, 20, 19 and 20, that ultimately to those who trust in Hashem, Paul will change this radically. where Paul will rephrase this as that the Redeemer will change those. No, he's going to come to those who change. It's a radical change, but we don't want to go there right now. This is Daniel. This is so matuk. This is so sweet. This is make your lips drip.
So now, Rabbi Kent, have you heard some of the things that have been explanations of the book of Daniel from a Christian prophetic perspective? You've heard, obviously, you've heard these things, right? Yeah. Could you use the analogy that you used the other day, or I think that you were talking to Ira and I before the show, how, when you know the language, when you understand the book of Daniel, in any of the books of the Tanakh, and it's Hebrew language, when you hear someone else provide an example, even though they're trying their very best to resound it and sort of match the meter and tone of it, it's like hearing somebody do a cover song, but they miss a few important notes, or they just don't quite hit the right word at the right time. Yeah. You can tell the difference. Can you kind of just expound on that?
The intimacy is there, just like, you think about it, Ruvain, you think about your grandson, that little boy, Binyamin, right? Yes. So when he cries, right, you hear that cry in a unique way. Well, because you have such an intimate, deep love for him. It does require intimacy, which means, let's say you listen to an exquisite piece of music. Let's take a secular music, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The first movement is very special. I've listened to it so many times. And if anyone tried to play that and even change one note, one transition, it would be so noisy. It would be so disturbing. One little movement of Mozart, something exquisite. And I'm taking something lahavdil, I'm taking something secular, but you notice even just the wrong. You just hear it, you feel it. So the first thing is that, in order to have the sensitivity, it doesn't mean you have to be great, smart, only thing is intimacy. Intimacy means you have to study Daniel, and it becomes a part of you. And then when anyone tries to imitate it, anyone tries to in any way massage it or change even a slight note, just one little beautiful, and this is harmony, quite literally, because what have we done here? What is harmony, holy Jews and children of the Most High? Listen up. Harmony is not a C played in different octaves. That's not harmony, just the same sound. What produces a harmony is C, E, G, which is a transcendent C major. That's why music, incidentally, is so common in the Jewish scripture, in the description of instruments, because the harmony, which is made up of different sounds. And what we've done is we have brought into view Ezekiel, we brought into view Zechariah and Daniel, 3 notes. And what did we do? We actually produce something such a transitional a chord, a harmony that just blows everything open. And that's why what we're doing, this type of study, incidentally, just so you know, is called a horizontal study of text. And that's what Chazal, the sages, were doing. There's nothing fancy going on. A vertical reading means that you're just starting the beginning of Daniel and ending Daniel, which is how Daniel was meant to be read. But unless you also are simultaneously reading the other notes of this chord, namely Zechariah and Ezekiel in this particular case, so if you read it horizontally, meaning we have, as we're doing this, we're learning Ezekiel and Zechariah with Daniel, pow, you go flying. That's the horizontal reading. That horizontal reading will shoot you vertical every time. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what I love is, I love being able to read in context. I mean, that's the most important point. When you look at the beginning, and this is the problem most of the time, is that when people look at 7, 13, and 14, it's the old story of, shooting the arrow and then drawing the bullseye around it. And trying to make it say something that it doesn't say. But if you look at the first 12 verses and you see like, and then in 13 and 14 you see like
a bear. That's what it says there.
And then you see, kavar enash, then, it's talking about like. It's not being twisted into something else. What really excites me is verse 18, because this really answers what you were talking about. The sense of those who trust in the clouds.
Read it. Just read it and let's just go up.
So
let's just go up. Just don't hold on to it. Just fly up.
So it says in English, then the holy ones of Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess the kingdom forever forever and ever.
Amen.
Amen.
Now,
Kadoshim,
why
Kadyon.
this is so exciting to me is because when we go back in time to Daniel chapter 2, he already speaks about this. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 44, it says, "And in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will establish a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, a kingdom that shall not be transferred to another people. It will crush and wipe out all these kingdoms, but it shall last forever."
I'll just for a moment. All the listeners will have a little kiss. You want to fall in love? You really want to just swoon with Hashem? The Aramaic of Daniel 7 is very explicit. It's translated as, normally that the holy ones will receive the kingdom. But there's actually a beautiful Aramaic word in there. And those of you who have it in front of you could follow with me.
Which is why I left it for you.
We save the finest morsel for you to deliver here.
This is very... I know, these shows, it's just, all right, my heart is pounding. Okay, listen, and prepare to receive, because that's the first Aramaic word. It's very similar to Hebrew. The kablon, which means the ones who received, malchusa, which means in Aramaic, your kingdom, kadishe elyonim. What does that mean? The holiness. What does Elyon mean?
Most high.
From above.
Most high.
Most high, or from
High. But it's literally a word that conveys, encapsulates a metaphor of altitude. Do you see?
something that is higher.
Higher.
Right.
What does that mean? Hashem is all over. He's not
Something that is
by
higher.
your toes. He's not on the feet. What does higher mean? The clouds of heaven. This is all you have to understand. This is like dripping chocolate all over. It's using a language of altitude here because it's an allusion to those who accept upon themselves the clouds of heaven. So therefore we have a language of altitude, and we have that vertical language. Very similar. I'm not going there now. That's a whole other thing of Isaiah chapter 6, where angels are flying above. God's train is going to the ground. Kadosh, Kadosh. What's happening there? We're not going there now. But all the language here is one of vertical altitude, a lateral language. And this is where the kisses come in. This is where you're changed forever. This is Kadishe Elyon. That's the key. It is very close to Hebrew. Those of you who
Yes,
Hebrew.
it is.
Elyon, right. It's virtually identical. It's a slightly different, it's almost, that's what I'm saying. You just look at it, you go, oh, okay. But that Elyon is a language of latitude, vertical latitude. And that's what's happening. That's why these are chosen. These words could have been chosen differently. But every single word gives a kiss. Every single word brings you higher and higher. Every single word changes you forever and ever. That's why, yes, once you understand what these four words mean that Ira just raised, then you then, if anyone plays out of tune, even one note plays wrong, it's ouch, ooh, it should hurt you. And if it doesn't hurt you, sweethearts, holy children, there's something wrong. That means learn more. Make this your husband. Hashem is your husband. The Lord of hosts is his name. Have that intimacy. If you don't have the intimacy, obviously you won't feel it when something odd is occurring.
So let's get more intimate. And we see these same exact words again, where? In verse 22 of Daniel chapter 7. Where again it says, 7:22, I'm sorry. Right. Where again it says, Lekadishe Elyonim.
Right.
Again in verse 22.
I mean, do you feel chills? Do you
amazing.
all feel?
It's absolutely amazing.
Do you just feel? I have goosebumps literally all over my arms, my chest, my back right now.
Because, layers upon layers.
Because then it goes on and it talks about not only that, but it says, V'zimna mita umalchuta hechesinu kadishin. Hechesinu, this idea of possessing.
Right.
To possess the kingdom.
And how do they possess it? Do you want to go a little intimate here?
Oh,
come on, let's do that.
Let's go.
Is kind of a language of inheritance, which means that you have those who are the children of God and those who are not the children of God. Who is heir? The children or those who are not the children? That's what's happening here is that the children are inheriting. They're grasping what is rightfully theirs because they're inheriting it. How? From the Abba, from Tati, from our father. And that's what's happening here. So they're receiving it on it, a language of inheritance, of receiving and taking possession of it. Now, again, Daniel now is going to swing backwards as he does. And of course, as it goes to 23, he's absolutely shaken to his core, because what comes into view is the horror of the fourth beast. And now, Ruvain, Ira, we now, with hindsight, we know what Edom is. I mean, even length of time, we know there's nothing as horrible as Edom. Nothing. And we know there's nothing as variegated as Edom, which means that Babylon was monolithic, from the time for 70 years of Babylon, which means 19 years before the destruction of the first temple, and then continuing on for 49 years past the 48 years from the destruction of the first temple, something around there. So that's the 70 years of Babylon. That period of time, it comes to an end, but it's not that frightening. And really, in truth, if you look at, and I'll prove to you that it really wasn't, it was much more benign. If you look at Jeremiah 25, Jeremiah says, foolish people, if you behave yourself and you don't start in with Nebuchadnezzar, because Jeremiah is saying, Babylon only has 70 years, 25 verse 12. That means what Jeremiah is saying is very specific. If you behave and don't fight Babylon, the first temple won't be destroyed. That means the Babylonians were nothing like the Romans, who went and smashed the stones and smashed everything. So we see that now with hindsight, we know that Edom, the Christianity, Christendom, which has morphed from it. And incidentally, Christianity in the first 3 centuries was far more variegated than it is today. There are expressions like, for instance, Gnostic Christianity that no Christian today would even recognize as Christian. I mean, I don't want to go into what Gnosticism is, but Gnostics were all pagans. Not all Gnostics were Christians, but they were Gnostic Christians. They all believed in many gods, and they didn't believe that Jesus died for anybody's sins. They believed that Jesus came, like many other divine beings, to impart knowledge, which help people understand who they are and how to escape this world. Believe me, this wacko stuff from outer space. But Gnosticism played a very important of forging and forming what today is Orthodox Christianity, which means that today you see much more normative, when I mean normative, sort of a more monolithic, close to Orthodox, even if you have the sects on the side. So what you have is this wild Edom breaking and splitting and, and splitting apart. And ultimately, that's the feat of the clay and iron. And one last piece. Do we have time? You tell me.
Oh, yeah. No, we have time. Go ahead.
Okay, so our sages tell us, look carefully at the 4 animals of Leviticus chapter 11. It's very interesting. Leviticus 11, the Torah, I told you, not a word, not a letter is added. Leviticus 11 tells us what animals, land animals, are clean and unclean, which you can eat, which you can't eat. After telling us that they need 2 signs, literally, mafresis, parasa, split hooves, and malegera. Malegera usually is translated as chewing its cud. It doesn't mean that. Malegera means it turns it over and brings it up. For instance, a rabbit doesn't chew its cud, but it eats its own feces because it keeps drawing out the nutrients. Right. So the key point is this. So, maligera means to turn it over. Now, this is a completely vestigial text, which means it's unnecessary. The Torah could have just said it has to have both signs, split hooves and chew its cud for a moment, or turn it over. And then we'd know, for instance, the camel does not, it chews its cud, but doesn't have split hooves, you can't eat it. The Torah doesn't stop. The Torah continues and says there are 3 animals which chew the cud but do not have split hooves, and it tells us the camel, the hyrax, and the hare. Okay, those are 3. And then the 4th, there's only 1 animal that has split hooves and doesn't chew its cud.
Chazir.
No. Chazir. We're going somewhere now. This is like totally, we're going to 34,000 feet.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what is unique about the chazir? Malegera means turn it over. So first, these represent the four kingdoms, which means each kingdom, Babylon, simply Malegera turns it over to Persia. Persia, Malegera simply turns it over to Greece. Greece, Malegera simply turns it over to the chazir, which means turns it over to Edom. Now, what is the uniqueness about the pig? No other animal. Its legs are split in half, but it looks kosher on the outside, but inside it's strafe.
Right.
And it's split hooves. Now, for the ultimate bang zoom, What does the word chazir mean? It means a pig. But what else does the word chazir mean? It also can be read as chayzer, which means it returns. The function of the pig, which genetically is closest to a human being, its DNA. What the pig does is it actually is the vessel, the evil vessel. That's why a pig represents everything that's unkosher, even though a lion is, in a sense, has no signs of kosher. The split hoof, the one like Daniel, the statue with the hoof, with the legs that are split, the function of the pig is to return the kingdom back. Back to who? Back to God.
Amen.
And that's the fifth kingdom, and that's the Mashiach of the Messianic age. That's how powerful that all is.
And Edom will, Chazal talk about Edom, Chazer, being a return, the possibility of Edom when the Messianic age comes, obviously making tshuva and actually returning and being kosher.
That's members of Edom.
Right.
Members of Edom will do tshuva. And we see it today. People coming from the Christian world who are looking differently at this.
So really, one of the things that we want to help people to understand is this whole concept of redemption is so encompassing and so broad and so beautiful that to misinterpret the book of Daniel and to interpret the prophets causes one to put blinders on to the true redemption that's going to come, in which even there is sort of a redemption of Esau at some level, and that's mind blowing when you think of that. That right. It's so encompassing that it draws all men to the Creator, and he redeems. It's from this portion this week. He reaches with an extended arm and he takes them out and he puts them in. You hear all of these concepts being boiled over in this conversation today. So, my dear Rabbi,
So I want to read one last verse because it's the last verse where we see those same words again. So I'm going to try my hand at my Aramaic again, and I'm going to let Rabbi translated. It says, Umalchata vishaltana urvuta di malchava techod kol shamaya yihivat le'am kadishe elyonin malchute malchut alam v'chol shatanaya le yiflechun. I love that word, yiflechun, because it's usually translated and misinterpreted. V'yishtash me'un. So could you enlighten us? Because again, we see this.
That means that unlike during the times of the Davidic kings, this is explaining, it's so exquisite. So unlike in the past, when, for example, you had during the time of Achaz or Chizkiyahu, he was a great man. Chizkiyahu was a holy king. But the Assyrians came to attack him, came to destroy him, as an example, going back to the Assyrian Empire, right? That means that all nations recognize that Hezekiah was, in fact, the leader anointed by God through his prophet? No. The difference is at the end of the days, the Davidic heir to the promise of 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 to 16 will be recognized and will be served, not worshipped. This is mistranslated terribly by Christian translators, but will be served, which means as a king, as David and Hezekiah deserve to be looked upon. Who is David? David is the author of Psalms. So he was a spiritual leader of the Jewish people. He was a prophet and he was a king. He took care of both our physical and spiritual. Now, he didn't do it. He was doing it to the will of Hashem. Just like Moses didn't split the sea, he just put his rod down. Hashem split it. So, but understand that unlike in the past, when the Davidic kings were not respected by all the world, and therefore they were not served by all the world because it was not the Messianic age. In the future, the Davidic heir to the dynasty and the promises, that individual will be recognized by all the nations of the world. Isaiah 60, kings will come by your light, and so on and so forth. You see, this meshes is so beautiful. You just feel so pure and holy, and you see this, and that's why you see what's the last verse of Zechariah? Last verse. You remember that 14 verse 16. I know we're out of time. Well, the kings of the nations will come and bring sacrifices in the temple. Incidentally, according to Hebrews 10, according to Romans 6, there's no longer any sacrifices. No, the Gentiles will bring karbanos back in the Beis Hamikdash. And who's ruling over that? The king, the Davidic king. It's all so splendid. Enjoy it.
Amen. So if you're listening today, you want to be one who is part of the people that are of the clouds of heaven, not people who worship the roof.
Exactly. That's exactly. It's the clash of the clouds versus the roof.
Amen.
That's exactly right.
And so, because it says in verse 27 that all the kingdoms of under heaven will be given to the people of the holy ones,
right,
of the Most High, or that Kedishei Elyonin.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. You see, when you have the truth, everything fits perfectly.
Everything.
Require every single verse, every jot, every delicious morsel of Daniel. Everything fits like a perfect. Everything falls in place. The moment you tamper with it, everything collapses.
Rabbi, what am I going to do without you for the next 3 or 4 weeks?
Why you have to do that with me?
I don't. We're going to have to start having you on. You're going to have to start coming on every week.
You got to come every week. Just dump your show with Israeli National.
I know. I'm going to get rid of. We'll dump everything.
No, we don't want you to get rid of that. I have too much
funny coffee around.
I have too much fun with that. I mean, I need smooth stuff at the beginning of the show. We thank you for listening and look forward to hearing from you during the week. Please. Let your friends know about Beyond the Matrix and share with them on Facebook. And you can go to my website, torahthreads.com. You can go to Rod's website, which is nativ.net. And Rabbi Singer is outreachjudaism. Is it org or com?
Org.
.org. Outreachjudaism.org. Thanks again for listening, everybody.